Yay, it's recording. Awesome. Let's get going. So welcome to ISTE's IBC PLN webinar, the Interactive Video Conferencing Professional Learning Network webinar. And it's the first of quite a few of them coming up into next year's big ISTE event in Philadelphia. Really happy to do live video in the classroom. Now, if you're doing a lot of video in your classroom already, I know you've got a lot to share. However, also today we have two people who really know what they're doing. First up, we have Martin McGuire, who is a Digital Media Systems Manager at Chicago Public Schools. And we also have Mark Hauk, who's taught in a bucket load of schools and is currently a virtual field trip coordinator for District 23 in Bright Columbia in Canada. So Doug Ashton was going to join us too, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Streamable Learning and Live Learning in Canada. However, he's caught in an airport. He's caught in transit to New York, I believe. And so Marty and Mark are going to guide us through live and interactive video. It's from a supplemental curriculum point of view and what they've been doing in across schools, and part of really thinking about how this sits in a larger digital learning strategy. So it's not about me, it's about you guys. So have a fantastic event and webinar, and I hope you get to join us in more of these events coming through the year. I'll hand it over to you, Mark and Marty.
All right, thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Marty, do you want me to sort of just jump in on some of these things?
Sure, go right ahead.
And yeah, basically, so my name's Mark Hauk, and I'm actually from British Columbia. I noticed there was a little typo on the thing. It said Bright Columbia. Hope we're kind of bright up here, you know. But
you certainly are.
British Columbia, Canada. And basically, Doug sort of approached Marty and I and asked if we would just say a few words about, you know, how we're kind of using his service, Streamable Learning, in our districts as part of our broader kind of digital video type platform, you know, to connect to places all over the world. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of Doug's slides. So I didn't create this, but I do know quite a bit about what he does, and we've been working with him for probably a couple of years. I think Marty even longer than that. So now let me just see if I can. Maybe I'll just put that full screen. Okay. All right, and I have my contact information too. If anybody has any questions after the program's over, just please feel free to send me an email. We're on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, so just totally feel free if you do have any questions or you want to follow up with anything. So Doug Ashton runs a company called Streamable Learning, and he's in, I believe it's Charleston, South Carolina. Is that right, Marty? Yeah. And so basically, this is his platform. You know, it's got a whole bunch of these kind of buzzwords like multi-sensory learning, classroom without walls, global education, project-based, blended learning, experiential learning. And it's a live video, live streaming site where you can basically, teachers can go in and book sessions and participate, you know, in all kinds of different experiences. And I'll just go through some of his stuff. It pretty much covers almost anything you can imagine. Those of you that are used to things like CILC, you'll recognize a whole bunch of the providers, but there's also things that aren't available in CILC. I think they have somewhere between 500 and 600 programs available for the school year. Now, and they're always kind of going out and grabbing more content providers, and it's getting to be a pretty far-reaching kind of network of providers, and it's quite an interesting system. Let me just kind of go through that. I'll talk a little bit about how this is organized, but it's basically almost every day of the school year there is some type of a session that's being held. They are kind of set up there around themes, like you can see on the presentation. There's things like Earth Month, National Bat Day, Engineering Week, and so there's a thematic component. There's also, you can just simply click on October and see the giant listing of sessions that are available in October. And there's other ways to sort as well. well by like grade level or subject area and stuff like that. And it's quite simple. You just browse through, you click book, and all you really need is an internet connection and some type of display and speaker system. It's kind of a one-way webinar type approach, just simple streaming. You don't need a webcam or anything on the school side. And this is a bit of a sort of an evolution of the platform. So basically we start with the physical field trips. I know nobody really wants to get rid of those. And Marty, please jump in anytime you want if you want to interject into anything. And I'll kind of take you through sort of our take on this as well. We've had kind of a similar evolution in terms of video in our district, but obviously physical field trips are great. We don't want them to go away, but since the advent of kind of video conferencing, you know, I think most of you that are on here sort of have experience with these sort of higher end video conferencing systems, and that's kind of where we started. And in terms of Doug's approach, it's the live streaming is kind of a maybe an easier or more accessible way to get involved. And he basically has a subscription-based thing. If anybody wants to pilot, I know Doug is totally fine with you just trying it out for half a year or something like that, and seeing, you know, see what you think. And I think we'll just maybe move on to Marty. Well, maybe Marty, I will talk about my experience, and then you can sort of jump in on yours in Chicago, if that's okay. Okay. All right, so contact info, if anybody needs it. We are a pretty small district. If you compare us to, say, Chicago, I think Marty was telling me he had something like 400,000 students in his district. Our district is probably maybe about 22,000 students, so it's pretty small. I mean, I think in the province of British Columbia, I think we only have around 600,000 students. So Chicago's pretty close to the size of our entire province. But in terms of our journey, where we started out using these expensive video conferencing systems. Basically we had 27 life-size endpoints in our district, and we had a couple of portable units. We were spending probably about $5,000 for each system, plus there was a maintenance contract, which wasn't cheap, that you had to pay yearly. And we were investing probably about $10,000 in content, and we would do maybe about 100 sessions in a year to all of our schools, and we have roughly about 45 schools in the district. So eventually we kind of had this system, which was we had a TV in a mobile kind of system that we would actually take on a trailer, and we would just drop it off to schools, and we would connect. And this was obviously very labor intensive. We could only do about 100 of them a year. We used to call this thing the Beast, because it was kind of heavy. We'd have to push into this trailer and drive around, and then we roll it down the hall, and all the kids, especially in elementary schools, would be like, "What's in there?" And we'd say, "That's a live cougar in there, kids. We're gonna let them out," you know, and they'd kind of freak out a little bit and go, "Oh," you know, it was kind of fun in that way. But hauling this thing around wasn't very fun. That's me in the middle, and a couple of my colleagues, Doug in the green and Merle on the other side of me. So we basically kind of knew that we don't want to haul around this trailer with a giant TV and a life-size system in there for much longer. So we kind of just made the transition to cloud-based technology. We sort of standardized on Zoom. It seems to be about the most popular, you know, streaming method that's out there these days in terms of the educational setting. It seems quite popular, but there are a ton of them. We use Skype. We've used pretty much every technology that's out there. All our schools need now is just a webcam and a microphone. We just use a Logitech webcam, and we use one of these little boundary microphones that sits on the desk, and it works pretty well. Down to probably about, I think we did almost 400 last year. So it's really kind of expanded, and the Streamable learning, it has kind of been a big part of that. And so I manage the program. I help our teacher librarians, who are the kind of leaders in each school, with scheduling and troubleshooting and that type of stuff. This is kind of an example of one of our setups. Some of our libraries use smartboards or just a projector, but some have just TVs on carts that they could even wheel around to different classrooms if they wanted to. This is Corinne at the Royal Botanical Gardens. And just as a little bit of a aside there, she's actually showing what a dandelion looks like to like an insect or a bee or something like that. It's always interesting to me that it looks like it has a great big red bullseye on it, so they know where to go. So it's a little bit of something new, hopefully, that you learned today. We have a website if anyone's interested, and we have all the resources that our teacher librarians use when they're booking stuff. Obviously, CILC, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, Skype in the Classroom, Streamable Learning, Digital Human Library, all that stuff, Scientists in Action, and there's a whole bunch more. If anyone's ever interested in taking a look at that list, right on the resources page of our website. So basically, back to Streamable Learning and sort of just a little bit of a history. I was the one that actually reached out to Doug, and because I really liked the concept that basically how it ran. It has a fixed schedule. Like I said, you can sort by month or educational theme, all kinds of different ways to sort. It's in webinar format, which is really nice because especially when our teacher librarians first come onto the system, it's quite a bit of a leap for them to go on and they book something on CILC and make sure their webcam is working or all this kind of stuff, and they're quite worried. Doing the Streamable Learning thing is a really easy access point for them to get started. The costs are fixed. Teachers can book as many as they like. And it's kind of resulted in the number of our sessions increasing dramatically using the service. And as of last year, another really cool thing is Doug and I have been working together with some of our Canadian content providers, like the Royal Tyrrell Museum and the Royal BC Museum and Corinne at the Royal Botanical, lots of royals out there, right? But we've been expanding the Canadian content on the site, and we're actually calling it Live Learning Canada. And it's just basically part of the Streamable Learning site. And sites from around the world, all over the US, can have access to the Canadian content as well as us Canadians. So that's a pretty exciting development for us. And I think I will go back to Marty. That is kind of our, whoops, let's go back. And Marty, I know Doug made a little slide for you. I'm not sure if you want me to leave that up there.
I appreciate it. You know what I think I'll do is I'll first talk to our experience in Chicago in the this space, whether it be video conferencing, webinars, or what have you. First, let me introduce myself again. My name is Martin McGuire, and I am the digital media systems coordinator for the district here in Chicago. In Chicago we have 600 schools. Roughly 400,000 students. I know that number's dropped over the years. I want to say it's closer to 375 at this point. But a lot of schools. And I've been with the district now going on 25 years. And for the past 18 years, I guess my space has been in educational technologies for the classroom, specifically AV technologies that would include video conferencing, online learning. We've done some distributed video, streaming video throughout the district. I started off at a school on the south side of Chicago called Kelly High School, and we received some VTEL system that the district had never had before. We've never seen. We had 3 schools that were awarded these VTEL systems, and they dropped it in our school and said, figure out what to do with it. Along with professional development that we were able to do between our schools and other schools throughout the Midwest, we took on the challenge of being a early adopter, working with museums, zoos, aquariums, different groups that had programming that we could bring live into our classroom. The problem that existed in Chicago was with 600 schools, if you said there was 30 classrooms in every one of those schools, the number's staggering. And we only had in our best year ever with video conferencing, we had maybe 6 schools that had video conferencing technology. And of those 6 schools, we had maybe 2 schools that actually had somebody that took the system by the reins and actually worked with outside groups like CILC, for example, to actually start providing programming. I want to say back then there was a pretty popular PacBell website, if I remember correctly. But getting programming for classrooms, it was a little bit scattered. It was a little all over the place. Fast forward today, right before we met Streamable Learning, we were developing a lot of our own programming. I think, in Chicago, we do for the district somewhere in the area of 300 plus events a year that we develop. We have a couple of studio labs that we will do basically professional development training, principal updates, things like that for the entire district. It became a great tool to just communicate with. And at the time we were using a not very well-known product out of Europe, but a very effective one through a company called Safari. It wasn't too long before we were starting to get noticed for a lot of the professional development that we were doing using webinar technology that I was introduced to Doug at Streamable Learning through our friends at Safari, and they said, "Hey, this seems pretty interesting. You want to check this out?" We at the time were only working with 2 providers outside of Chicago: the Museum of Science and Industry, and another organization called News Literacy out of New York. And those 2 organizations that we worked with were providing us with opportunities for our classrooms. However, you had to be pre-selected to be a part of the opportunities that they were giving to Chicago. You had to go through a professional development training session before you could ever bring a video conference into your classroom. And it was even in our best year ever, I want to say we had maybe 45 sessions in that year, impacting a little over 100, 110 classrooms. So our story sounds very similar, Mark, to what you were presenting. The in regards to the hardware, the expense, the trouble that people had actually finding content, making the connections, and I'm willing to bet that story is replicated across the country when it comes to video conferencing. The difference when we ran into Doug and Streamable Learning, the difference that in the tool that they were providing, the platform they were providing, was that it was just a one-way stream, which was very similar to what we were doing in Chicago with our professional development. So I was aboard immediately because I knew we had webcams, Logitech cameras, Chat 150 microphones on every desk in every principal office across the district. And when we would do webinars where with small groups of maybe say 30 principals, it was a challenge to get everybody up and running and microphones working. And principals at the time would always take apart their equipment, put it in their drawer. And then when it came time for a video conference, a webinar, well, it was a video conference because there was 2-way audio video. They'd bring it back out, set it back up, and it just wasn't working. So, we started to experience that if we can just do a one-way delivery of content and limit the interaction at the user end, the principals, for example, to being able to chat and take polls. And then if there was somebody specifically that we wanted to call upon, we can bring them in via video, give them rights, and bring them into the session. But was it really necessary to have everybody broadcasting audio and video all the time? And we realized that no, the answer was no. That's when our webinars kind of shot through the roof in Chicago. Now we're doing hundreds a year. When we met Doug at Streamable Learning, and he was actually doing something very similar with museums, zoos, aquariums, we were quick to jump on board. We tried out a couple of sessions. We really liked what we saw. Here we are a couple of years later. And as I said before, in our best year, we may have impacted 110 classrooms when it was up to video conferencing. And I always love to tell the story. It was on the first year using the system, Streamable Learning. On November 1st of that year, of that school year, we had a cultural activity with an organization in Austin, Texas called McGuire Museum. And it was a program on the Day of the Dead, which is a cultural activity for Latinos. And we made the connection with the museum. We knew that it was going to be a popular program in Chicago. And in one single 40-minute session, we had over 100 classrooms in Chicago alone make that connection. Connected up with the McGuire Museum, we're able to hear and see the presenter. Students were asking questions. The presenter had polls ready to go to ask students questions in return. It was engaging, it was interactive, and it was just so fun for students. But it was a major breakthrough for Chicago, because we've never, in the history of the program, ever since we've been doing this, have had that many schools participate in an event that way. Now, to have on specific days, to have 100 classrooms on a program is no big deal. But for it to happen for the first time was incredibly exciting. We knew that this was a breakthrough for us here in Chicago. It's not the final frontier for us. We think that this is a great jumping off point for schools to get involved in interactive content. I like to call this interactive streaming, because you're getting the questions, you're able to do the polls. When students hear their school, a presenter ask a question and then give them credit for that question. We have a question from Curie High School in Chicago, and the students in the 12th grade classroom, Miss Soto's classroom, the kids, if you're in a classroom when the kids get their question asked, it's incredible. They get so excited. And the other thing is that when we did have 100 classrooms connected to a session, it wasn't until we got to the Q&A session that any one of those 100 classrooms realized that they were not alone and that there were 99 other classrooms on that call. So the interactive content, it's still engaging, it's still interactive, but it really feels as though that presenter is presenting to you alone. And it's not until you get to the end of the session that you realize you're not alone and other people are on watching the same program you're watching and asking questions and answering polls and things like that. So we've really had a great experience with Streamable Learning. It's been used this year like crazy. If I could, I'd like to share my screen, and I'd like to kind of quickly show you. Let's see, here we go. We did an integration in Chicago, and let me know if you can see this. Can you see my screen? Okay, great. So I'm logging in. This is our Safari Montage system. This is our learning object repository. All of our resources, whether they be professional development resources, classroom resources, you name it, are in this tool. And resources within our lore can link out to other resources. It's interoperable. It's an interoperable technology. It's one component of our ecosystem in Chicago. And if I were to log in, when I log in for the very first time, I get a list of schools because I'm the administrator for this. But if I were to go in and stuff around, let me pick our central office. And I log into our central office for the first time. This is our homepage. And this is something new. We put Streamable Learning right inside of our Safari lore. So when you log on to Safari and you're looking for classroom resources, you name it, you also have Streamable Learning right on the front page. So teachers, when they log on, click on Streamable Learning, and through a IMS connection, through an LTI connection that we have with Streamable Learning, once they click on it, they don't need to do anything. They don't need to sign in. They don't need to do anything else. They're now in the system. And once they're in the system, they can look for resources by grade level, by month, or by subject. So if I were to go in here and say, let me look what's going on in November of 2018, I could bring up all of the different events that are going on. And as you can see, here's my favorite event. McGuire Museum presents Day of the Dead. Now, if I were interested in this event, I can come over here and I could say, well, let me learn a little bit more about this. If I'm interested and I say, yeah, I like this, I want to attend this event, I could just simply click book. And it does a couple of things. It's going to give me the link right here, as you see on the screen, but it's also going to send me the invitation directly to my email, where it's a calendar appointment that gets put right on my calendar. So teachers, when they start off at the start of the school year, can look through the entire year of events, and there's like Mark has said, there's 500-600 events available each year. They can go through the events. This one in particular, the Day of the Dead, is available multiple times in a day. Let me back up so you can see that. I want to say that it's available 3 times on November 1st. And you'll notice that one of those times, the program is done 100% in Spanish. So that's another great feature of this platform, is that they are now starting to provide content in other languages. We started off with Spanish because that was what we requested in Chicago, but now there's also programs that they're working on in French as well. So, you know, if the first session at 10 a.m. won't do, I could always attend the next session at 12:10 or the final session at 1:10. But it's really easy to sign up for events. You can see just by hitting book, I've now signed up for that event that's going to take place on November 1st, and I'm all set. All I need in my classroom is that link, an internet accessible computer, and some type of projection device with speakers, and you're off and running. And this has really, really been a game changer for us here in Chicago because, as I've said, we now have kind of laid a great foundation. Teachers are finally using video technology in their classroom. They're making connections with subject matter experts from across the country. Pretty soon we'll be collaborating with other classrooms that are also Streamable Learning customers. So when you attend an event, you'll have the option of being able to, in a post-event, link up with another classroom in another part of the country that has attended that event along with you. So some interesting ideas that they've got going on. And as you can see right up here at the top, they also have video conferencing available. So we believe that this is kind of like step one. We believe video conferencing will be big again, but I think it's going to be bigger than it has been before, because I think that this is kind of laying the streaming, the interactive streaming is laying that foundation that's needed. It's that stepping stone to video conferencing, and we've been really happy about it. I'll open the floor for questions if there are any. So there was a couple of things in chat. It's a good point. I guess Jason here said limited interactivity doesn't feel like a step backwards, though. This was the delivery model we used back in 1994. You know, and I got to agree with you. And if I did say that, I apologize. I didn't mean for it to sound as though it was a step backwards. But what it really is it's a first step for a lot of our classrooms that have never used video conferencing or never had a webinar or a stream into their classroom. But I think it's more than just a good first step because of the interactivity. I try and get Doug to always say interactive streaming, because that interactive part, you can't leave that off because you know, along with being incredibly engaging, they're interactive as well. And I think that being able to bring subject matter experts from institutions that before were inaccessible to us, to be able to bring those subject matter experts directly into the classroom is priceless.
Yeah, and Marty, I can totally second that. And just to sort of address that question from Jason, and I totally agree with what you said as well. Like, I think obviously being there in a real field trip, that's kind of the, you know, the very, very top. But the second, I think, is being live, talking to somebody else, being able to, you know, relate to them in a true two-way video conference session. But just like Marty said, like, we found that it's a difficult jump, especially for a lot of our teachers that, I mean, really even today don't have a ton of technological expertise, many of them, and are very scared about the technology. Being able to click on a button and say book and click on a link, and all of a sudden somebody's talking to them. It's been almost a bit of a revolution for us in terms of connecting people together. And I think it will still evolve into something bigger than that as well.
I agree with you. And being able to bridge the informal and formal learning institutions to bring the subject matter experts into the classroom is really the selling point for us here in Chicago to our teachers. You know, everybody seems to be very excited about this. I think early on, I made the mistake of actually maybe making the actual platform a little more difficult to find than it needed to be. So through the IMS connection that we have, IMS Global Connection, Streamable Learning was a IMS member and is LTI compliant, making them interoperable with our Learning Object Repository. So by putting Streamable Learning right on our repository front page, it's really picked up people's ability, number one, to find it. And really, it's almost like when it comes to training, it's almost like ATMs. You know, when ATMs popped up, there was no training available, right? You just were expected to go up, and it was very intuitive, and you figured it out. And that's what this is. It's just very easy for teachers to use. They go to it, they understand it. The biggest question is around cost for the most part. People are always concerned that is this something we have to pay for? Well, the district picks up the cost, and it's to the point that a teacher in a classroom could book as many programs as they want. So we encourage people to get onto the system early, to look throughout the calendar for the entire school year and book as many programs as they want. And while I'll say that I've never told teachers in all the training that I've done over the years to never use video as a reward in a classroom setting, it's video is supposed to be infused into lessons, not be used as a treat or as an award, a reward at the end of the week. This is it might be the exception, and I think that I tell people, there are a lot of great programs, especially in early childhood, on Thursdays and Fridays, and it's something that kids look forward to. So that might be the carrot that you might need to get other things done in the classroom, with that promise that at the end of the week we're going to take this virtual field trip. So it's been fantastic.
That's fantastic. I might just throw a question out there, because there might be some people listening on in who are the technology integrators as well as teachers and content providers. So getting the IMS thing, getting all that thing to be set up, was that an onerous task, or is it a few hours? Like, I've never done it, and I just out of interest, what sort of steps need to happen to make that all work for their districts?
Yeah, it's not very labor intensive. I think that, number one, when these platforms are being developed, people build to a standard, and if they build to that standard, the IMS standard, these platforms should intersect in one way or the other, interoperate. In the case of Streamable Learning, it's a simple single sign-on. So once you're into our Safari platform, you're into all other platforms, including Streamable Learning, and it's just a matter of going out and picking out programs. So that's kind of all done in the background for us. For me, it's not very labor intensive. Once I realized that Streamable was IMS Global compliant, I just needed to let our folks at Safari know, hey, we are subscribers here in Chicago. Please flip the switch and turn this on here in Chicago. I think that a couple of other groups that they interact with really well. Streamable Learning interacts very well with Clever as a platform, single sign-on, and also ClassLink is another fantastic one. I love ClassLink. So I think they do a really good job of putting EdTech platforms together on a single platform for single sign-on, and people are off and running, making life easier for teachers.
Thanks. I'm actually just throwing a question. Sorry if I'm jumping above the chat, but I just the first step. Just say so someone's watching this recording and they go, "I'm totally in, but I've got to now onboard everyone in my school or district." What would be the first steps to actually, selling the concept, so to speak? So we definitely heard you guys, both of your transitions through to doing bucket loads of events. Just wondering, what are the first steps to get the initial ball rolling in your own schools, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest, if I can jump in there, Marty, just for us, I mean, we pretty much just talked to Doug, and Doug said, how long do you want to try it? And we just said, well, I don't know, give us 6 months. And, our teachers were basically sold in 6 months. And I want to let Marty answer this as well, but I know there's a question from Jackie. She's talking about teachers that participate in a streaming event. Do they now do sort of like one-on-one type experiences? And that's actually the case. This is one thing that we start them on, and when they're ready and when they want to, if they want to start to branch out and get more advanced, when we're talking about video conferencing, they definitely, it's almost like getting their feet wet. Now they can actually go out and, connect via Zoom or by whatever other technology they have available to them. We have lots of teachers. Obviously, the school has to kind of budget that in if there are costs and stuff like that, but we have lots of our schools that now connect to services all over the place, CILC and many more. So I guess that's kind of two answers there, but I'll turn it back to you, Marty, you can answer both of those as well.
And in Chicago, it was when it comes to the onboarding, you know, it was a very similar experience. You know, we started off by trying it. We didn't have quite the 6 months, but we were sold right away because we saw usage just with the schools that we released this to. Just teachers, once we went in and we sat with a group of teachers, showed them what this was, and then kind of let them start booking on their own. It just took off from there. From that point, being that we're 600 schools, 400,000 students, very difficult to get in front of everybody at one time. So what we do is we'll hold webinars of our own. I'll do little introduction videos, a couple snippets, 3 minutes, how to log on, how to book, and how to attend an event. And literally, I make a 3-minute little video that I'll send out to people. Streamable Learning does a really good job of sending out month-to-month kind of announcements, what's going on this month. So that really kind of keeps in everybody's face and reminds people of upcoming opportunities. And it's been really easy to roll out. Like I said, the user, you know, so user friendly. People take to it quite quickly. And yeah, this is so far our best year yet, our best start of the school year. We've done a couple of early professional development sessions that have just really kind of set listened to teachers, number one, about the kind of programs that they wanted. That was the other interesting thing, is when we sat down with teachers, somebody would say, well, you know, you guys don't have this on the list. And I would say, why don't you give me whatever topic that it is that you're looking for, and let me take it back to Streamable Learning. Let's see what they can do. And I got to tell you, they're very responsive. They want to know what schools want to have in the calendar. And with the 100+ providers that are now part of the Streamable Learning umbrella, somebody out there could probably, you know, put together content and put together an event around just about any topic you could think of. So yeah, that's our story in Chicago.
Awesome. And we've got a question here from Diane Smith. Is this a yearly subscription, or can schools pick and choose which ones they get to participate in?
It is a yearly subscription for us here in Chicago. I think, Mark, is it the same for you out there?
Yeah, it's the same for us.
Yeah, so it's a yearly subscription. I think it's the way that they do the math. It's based off the number of students. They have a formula that kind of says students equals so many classrooms, and then they put the price together that way. But I encourage people to reach out to Streamable Learning if they're interested in trying this out, because I tell you, that's the one good thing I think Mark and I both agree on. They're very good at letting people kick the tires. I think once you try it, I think their theory is once you try it, you're going to buy it, because it's great content, and teachers seem to really take to it quickly.
No worries. Well, thanks very much, Mark and Martin, for putting this all together. And look, if you could just throw back to your PowerPoint to the very start where it's got your contact details, because there'll be people who would love to get in touch with you, learn more about what you've been doing. And look, and thank you very much for joining us, especially for it's a late afternoon for you guys, or about to be late anyway. And look, yeah, it's obviously worked incredibly well for your schools. And I'm guessing it's going to keep on doing that right into the future. And so while they're pulling up their contact details, definitely check out ISTE has a whole bunch of different special learning network events which you can get involved with, especially the IBC people. So this is kind of like a mini ad, but next month on October 11 at 5 p.m. You're going to check out Kristen Edwards. Kristen Edwards is from City BOCES at the Center for Interactive Technology and Innovation. She's running an interesting chat. It's all about class-to-class collaboration using video conferencing technology. It's all about giving kids the opportunity to communicate, share, and do all these sort of things that Marty and Mark were talking about, but hearing from what's been happening in New York. So I will put that register link in the chat here, but you can also find that at connect.iste.org. Just sign into iste.org and go to the Interactive Video Conferencing Professional Learning Networks discussions. You will see that Tammy, who is in and out of this chat, she's been having some storms running through her place and causing a whole bunch of internet trouble, but you will find the chat that she only raised 4 hours ago. feel free to sign in. So again, October 11 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I should say, because hey, this is a global thing. Please feel free to sign in. And Kristen Edwards has a bucket load to share at City BOCES. So yeah, thanks so much. And look, thanks again, Marty and Mark, for joining in on this. And I'll leave the floor open. I can see Marty's just thrown his email address there too. And if the chat's not going to come through very well in the video, we'll just go memcgure@cps.edu. Is Marty's one? I actually said that right, hopefully correctly. And Mark, you might as well chime in on as well, because otherwise everyone has to listen to me.
Yeah, sorry about that. Doesn't look like Doug used a very good color for those emails. Let me just see if I can kind of just change them to, although it won't let me change, fortunately. I think it's part of the design theme or something like that. But
what I love about this, about with distance learning people and anyone who works in IT, is that you just work with what you got. That's how it is.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Audra, for having us.
Thank you guys for being available.
All right, thank you so much. Enjoy your evening. I'm going to go enjoy my morning. I'm down in Sydney. All right, all the best. We'll hope to catch you at another IBC PLN event.